Yeah, I'll be talking about alias analysis, how it's currently implemented in LLVM, and I'll be adding my proposal on how to enhance it by leveraging flow information. Right. So I'm also aware that there will be varying degrees of understanding of the subject. So I'll try and see if I can strike a balance between those who are very knowledgeable on the topic and those who have got only a very fleeting understanding of the subject. So let's get started. So let us start with a simple example. We can see here on the left side a simple C code, or it could be C++. We have declared 4 automatic variables here. Sorry. Right. And because they're local variables, they get allocated on the stack, which you see on the right side. We also have an external variable pointer to an integer called q. Now, what we are trying to do here is, as you can see here on line number 4, we are assigning the address of A to Q on line number 4. And then a bunch of things happens which we don't care much about right now. Then on line number 7, the address of B gets assigned to Q, right? And then we look at this loop, and what we see here is in line number 10 inside the loop, the memory address to which Q is pointing to keeps on getting overridden by I. And this value of I, we can see here that it's 100. It keeps on getting overridden, and then by the time we exit the loop, the memory location that Q is pointing to will have the value 100, right? And then this 100 here will get added to the value of A, which would be, as you can see here, it's A is 2. And it doesn't get overwritten by the time it reaches here. So the result is actually 102. Now, in compilers like LLVM that are extremely aggressive about optimization, this whole thing will get converted into one single statement that just says return 102, right? This is what we would expect of LLVM or any other compiler that compiles very aggressively. Most of them do nowadays, so even including GCC. But the thing about LLVM is there's a small twist here because LLVM will not be able to manage this transformation for the reason that its alias analysis infrastructure doesn't support such a mechanism. Now, let's see what will happen here. So when you say, when you dereference Q and assign the value of I to it, we can see clearly as humans, we know that the last value of Q would be, the memory location at Q would be 100, right? Now there's a transformation called SCCP, sparse conditional constant propagation, that can figure out that finally the value of Q would be 100, and it would replace this statement number 10 with probably B is equal to 100, because it knows that it's supposed to know that Q is pointing to B because of line number 7. But what it will do is actually, because of the lack of support of control flow analysis and alias analysis, what it will do is it'll say star Q is equal to 100. Now another transformation can kick in that can figure out that star Q is equal to 100 is actually loop invariant. This is called loop invariant hoisting or loop invariant syncing, that can move this statement outside the loop. Now, what is the advantage of that? We know that when you dereference, you're accessing memory, and you would actually be accessing memory 100 times inside the loop. And when you take it out, you get a lot of saving, right? So when you move star Q is equal to 100 out of the loop, you're supposed to get a lot of saving. But because of the drawbacks of the current implementation of the basic alias analysis in LLVM, it will be unable to move line number 10 outside the loop, because it would not be able to figure out whether Q is pointing to A or to B at this point of time. So when you inspect the code manually, it's pretty obvious, right? But the thing with the current implementation of the basic alias analysis in LLVM prevents it from moving line number 10 outside the loop, because it doesn't know whether Q is pointing to A or it's pointing to B. Any questions so far?
Cool. Not on chat, yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's move on to the next slide. So like I said, we use alias and we have this information because we know that Q is invariant in the sense that, the value of the memory doesn't change, but the value inside the memory will keep getting overwritten with I. That we know, right? And like I mentioned in the previous slide, we know that the best transformation that we can have is to move line number 10 outside the loop. So now let's take a look at the raw LLVM that gets generated. This is before mem2reg happens, before the promotion of these variables from memory onto registers happen. This is what on the right side you see is what the LLVM intermediate representation would look like. And here we see that this particular line, basically not, sorry, this line number 10 can be roughly mapped to this particular line in LLVM. Basically, we are loading whatever is there in Q and putting it into this variable, right? And our goal is to take this line, because it's a load instruction, and somehow take it outside the loop. Okay. Now, why does one way to do this is to look at how we are managing memory, right? So at every point of time, we see that Q keeps getting assigned one set, percentage A, and then here it memory location of A, and here it is memory location of B. One thing that that is obvious is we can model these kind of things by saying, okay, at this point of time, we know that Q points to some location in memory, and this point it points to some other location in memory, and then we keep track of that, right? So this is one main way to model alias analysis, and there are different kinds of alias analysis. So before we move on with the example, I just want to take a small diversion here and quickly outline what kind of alias analysis are possible, at least the result of the alias analysis. So one of them is May alias. Basically, you query the alias analyzer and then you get a bunch of results, right? So you ask the alias analyzer, okay, I have these 2 pointers. Tell me whether they alias each other or not. Now, the result could be May alias, which means that these two may or may not. It's actually the most conservative and the most safe result. And it's also the most useless because you can't do anything much with it, right? Once, if somebody tells you that it may or may not, then you wouldn't know what to do. So you just be conservative and move on. Now, the next two are good ones because no alias can tell you, for example, here that inside the loop at line number 10, if you remember, if you know for sure that Q does not alias A, that's the time we know that we can move Q star Q is equal to I out of the loop, right? And must alias similarly could be useful. Then there's the fourth type called partial analysis, which would take one long range of memory, probably an array or a structure, and say whether another pointer is somehow maps onto one of those values inside that range, right? So all these three, number 2, 3, and 4 are very useful, and May alias is is probably the safest, but as I said, it's the most unuseful of all the results. So LLVM has got this basic alias analysis that will give you one of these results. And because it doesn't have control flow information, it's also stateless in the sense that every time you give it 2 pointers and ask whether they alias each other, it'll do the whole thing all over because it doesn't keep any state information. And it uses simple heuristics and simple rules. Like, for example, 2 fields in a structure can never be at the same memory, right? So they point to 2 different memory locations. So things like that. So you just ask it, are these 2 pointers aliasing each other? And it either says yes or no. I mean, in terms of one of these 4 results. So if you get a May alias, there's nothing much you can do with that. And also keep in mind that because it is not structured in a way that it's global in the sense that when it says 2 pointers, actually, let's say it returns no alias, it means that it's no alias throughout the program. It's not sensitive to which portion of the program that result is relevant to, right? So when it says no alias, it will never alias anywhere in the program. That's what it means, at least in the basic alias analysis. So one of the ways to run basic alias analysis is to basically take let's take this raw LLVM that gets generated from Clang. We run this.
Sorry for interrupting. We have a question.
Sure.
We have a question on chat. So Anshul
Sure.
is asking, is this implemented currently or is this part of the proposal?
It's
Anshul, you can
part of the
follow.
proposal.
Okay, cool.
So it's not upstreamed yet. Probably I'll be doing that sometime in the next coming few weeks or a month or so. Cool. Shall I continue?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is one way to evaluate the alias analyzer. We have something called AA eval, which is one pass that takes basically alias analysis tools can be chained. So first is you run a basic alias analysis on top of this LL program. Then there's an evaluator that will take any two pointers or all pairs of pointers, which is probably an n-square algorithm. It will take every pair of pointers in the program, and then it'll run basic queries on that to see whether those two in that pair, whether they alias each other. And then you have another pass that will take the result and print it out. So if you see the result, you see, for example, there's a no alias between A and I. And there's a no alias between B and I and so on, right? One important aspect that you need to, if you remember, let me go back to that store instruction. This line, variable 8, the local variable 8, it gets loaded from Q. Now, we want to know here whether 8 is actually aliasing A or whether it's actually aliasing B, right? If we know that it's aliasing B, then constant propagation will assign the value 100, and then loop hoisting will can take it outside the loop, right? So it cannot do that. Like if you see this result here, so percentage 8, I mean this variable 8, it says may alias A, or it can alias B as well. I highlighted the result here. So what that tells us is there's nothing much we can do with this information, right? It says it may alias, may not, we don't know. And therefore, we will not be in a position to move that the load instruction outside the loop, right? So this one example of a case where the basic analysis in LLVM falls short of optimizing aggressively. And this is exactly the place where places like these, where some flow sensitivity can be used to move this stuff outside the loop and make it better. Okay, so continuing with LLVM's basic alias analysis, it uses simple rules like I mentioned, like it says, okay, distinct globals cannot alias each other. Neither can they cannot alias with stack allocations or heap allocations because they'll be on the heap and so on. Memory that is created using calloc or malloc, they'll be on the heap and they can never be actually aliasing any of the stacks. Sorry, variables on the stack. Excuse me. Different fields in a structure, like I said, can never alias each other. Indexes into arrays, obviously, there are different addresses because they're contiguous memory elements and they can never alias each other. So what basic alias analysis does is to, apply a bunch of rules. It takes those two variables that came in as the query and then does a check of what memory locations each one of them can be pointing to. And then it does a check, basically it applies all these rules. It's a fairly long piece of code, but there is a fairly straightforward bunch of rules that it applies. So even simple things like gep instructions that are lexically similar must alias each other, right? So if you guys know what gep instruction is, it's the get element PTR instruction. Basically, there's a base address, and then there's an offset from that base address, and gep gives you that ability to load the address starting from that base address until the offset. Okay, so just to reiterate the problem statement, we have these two lines that we are concerned about, which is when you assign the memory location of A into Q and then of B into Q, that of B into Q, and then this is the control flow graph roughly. I put a C code here instead of LLVM because that LLVM code is pretty long and it's it comes in the way of describing the solution, right? So this is what I mean. This code can be rewritten in this way. We have this bunch of things that happens as initial allocations. Then there's a check. That loop, if you remember, instead of the for loop, it keeps checking whether it's less than 100, and if it's less than 100, you go to B2 or else you go to B3, which is the exit. This is the last basic block. So we see the problem statement can ultimately be summarized into asking whether Q aliases B. If we know that it aliases B, then we are safe to move this guy out of the loop and put it here inside B3. Does it make sense? Any questions before I move forward? Okay, I'll continue. Now, one quick note before I move on. So this statement here, the value of I being assigned to the memory location pointed to by Q. Why is it important that we know that it aliases B? Because if you don't know that, it can also alias A, right? So if it aliases A, then the value of A will keep getting changed because of this statement at every iteration of the loop. And therefore, it will be impossible for us to take this guy and put him here. Okay. So like I mentioned earlier, we model not only the one that I'm proposing, but also the basic alias analysis assumes that a pointer will be pointing to some abstract memory location, either in the heap, or it can be on the stack, or it can be some global memory somewhere, right? So let us say some terminology now. So we have a particular statement, the store statement here, which is equivalent to star Q is equal to ampersand A. We are storing the value of the address of A into Q, right? This is line number. PP stands for program point 15, which is just the line number. So at line number 15, we have the store instruction where we say the address of A is being assigned, assigned to location pointed to the Q. And line number 21, program point 21, we have this statement where B, the value of B, the corresponding thing is happening with B. And then now we need to know our object of interest is number PP42, sorry, where we need to know where we are getting the memory location from Q, and we are loading it into 8, the local variable. Now, let us say we have this, we assume that the abstract memory location is represented by MPX, where X is the object of interest. And let us assume that PTRP of X, this expression represents all the possible set of memory locations that an object can point to. Right? At every location, you can assume that A could be pointing to arbitrarily any number of memory locations. We don't know. Our goal is to find them out. Right? The whole object of, at least one of the objectives of alias analysis is to figure out for every pointer valued variable, we need to know what kind of memory locations it's pointing to, the set of all the memory locations, and that is represented by this expression PTRs. And not only that, that P here stands for at that particular line. It should have been PP for program point. So that's what this PTRs P of X stands for. So statement of P represents the statement of the program point just after P. So what this means is we need to figure out whether this particular line, after it executes, is what we call it as PP15, right? This is post the fact, after the execution of that particular statement. So it's not before that, it's after that.
Shrisha, there is a question on chat. Can you explain MPX again? The first one, that MPX equals to abstract memory location.
Right. So MPX basically is like, take a look at this statement, right? Percentage A is equal to alloc. alloca statement. So we have, if you remember in the C code, we have 4 local variables, right? A, B, C, and D. C is an array. So basically, when you translate it into LLVM, it by default it puts everything in memory, right? So whatever is on the stack will get allocated into the stack memory through the alloca instruction. Now, A is now actually a memory location, right? So potentially at any point of time in any at any line, because of complex interactions, it can be pointing to any memory location. At this line, it is pointing to a particular memory location. But somewhere down the line, maybe because of assignments, maybe you override that with some other memory location, and it happens very unintrusively without you knowing that A can be arbitrarily pointed to something else. That's the difficulty with pointer analysis. It can be, in fact, it can be pointing to not one, but potentially be pointing to more than one memory locations, right? So percentage A here, somewhere down the line, could be pointing to, let us say, some memory in the heap, or it could be pointing to some memory in the stack or some global memory. It could happen, right? So each of that memory location is that abstract memory location that it is pointing to. That's what MPX means. So P here stands for the program point. So at program point P, X would be pointing to this particular abstract memory location. Got it?
There's another question on the chat. Percentage A, so Vishwanath is asking percentage A is an SSA variable, right? How can it point to any other place than the alloca it was initially assigned to?
So this can always be overridden by some other memory location, right? I mean, if you, okay, maybe percentage A may not be, but something like Q.
Yeah, you can't really reassign A, right?
Yeah. You can't reassign A. Sorry, that was a wrong example. I think Q can be. So if you look at Q could be pointing to anything because it's an external. It was declared as an external int. I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. A cannot be, but Q could be.
Yeah.
Okay. So even among the different memory locations that we talked about, we have different types. Even in LLVM, we have got C structures and classes that model these kind of memory locations. One is, you can have a stack, or it could be a heap. So basically, the heap, I think probably it comes from the intrinsics. So malloc and kelloc, I think can be modeled through the intrinsics. And then we have global memory. And then there's another type of memory called decomposed gap, which I'll talk about later. Basically, this represents the memory location as referenced by get element Peter instruction. So the memory location that M of X that I pointed out earlier could be any one of these. And they could all be compared to each other to check whether whether they're the same location or not. Okay, any questions at this point? Okay. So what we do with, if you want to get in some flow information, we start by defining some transfer functions. Now remember that, memory can get affected not with all kinds of instructions, but a certain subset of those, which I'll be summarizing later. So let us say we start with a store instruction, right? We define a transfer function for the store instruction as follows. Now, if we have the store instruction like this, right? Store A into Q. We can say that, this point, whatever Z is pointing to, I mean, if you see this particular statement here, this store, I just given a template here. So Z is the object of interest. So whatever you are storing into that would be X. So pointer, basically whatever is in Z now, we'll have all those memory location that X is pointing to. Right, and therefore, if you see in these lines, the example here maps to at line number 15, we have this Q here, which is the equivalent of Z, would be mapped to whatever memory location A is pointing to, and so on. Same with 21, which is the equivalent of B. This is A and this is B. Excuse me. However, if A itself is not of a pointer type, then there's no effect here because Q, the value of Q is not changing. But if it's a non-pointer, thus that, you know, it will get saved in that memory location, but it won't affect the statement. So whatever was there, the original Z would actually come in from the previous statement, which is P minus 1. Does it make sense? So this statement would only be relevant if A or B is actually a type of integer, but not otherwise. So if you're storing some scalar variable like 10 or 20 or whatever, then nothing changes, right? So there's no effect of a pointer changing. Now similarly on the other side, a load instruction, we define transfer function for that as well, where when you load something like this, so we have a load instruction here. 8 is equal to load whatever this, it is trying to load something, whatever is there at Q. Then we know that whatever is in Q gets assigned to 8, and therefore whatever 8 points to will be the same thing as what this guy is pointing to, whatever is there in Q. This is what it means. And similarly, like just like the store instruction, if it's not a pointer, then there's no change, and we just pass on propagate the value of Z to the next line, to the next statement from P minus 1. Okay. So similarly with the alloca function, right? So an alloca function you have, like I mentioned, I think that was the doubt you're asking about. We just take whatever is there in the stack. If you remember those 3 or 4 different types of memories, we have the stack and we assign that to Z here. So this is just another transfer function. Sorry about this slide. I think it's a pretty long one. So this is important to understand before we move to the gap instruction. Let's consider this example. We have got a structure RGB that represents red, blue, green color, and then we have got a pixel, a dot on the screen on the monitor with the X and Y axis, the value of the location of the pixel, and the corresponding RGB value, which is again inside this nested structure. And let's say we have a matrix. It has a bunch of pixels in the form of a loop. So each row of pixels would be, let's say it has 1024 rows, and it's basically array of arrays. Right? So and another integer that says num rows. Now inside the compute function, we are being passed two unsigned integers R1 and R2, and a constant reference to a matrix. So it's been allocated somewhere else maybe from the caller function. We have this loop where if we check if R1 is equal to R2, then we are getting this addressing this memory. We want this matrix pixels at R1 at column number 40. 40 is hard coded to column number is hard coded to 40 here. We get the RGB structure at that point, and we want the red value here. And similarly R2, right? Same thing. We subtract it, but if they're not equal, we add them up, and then we take the average and return the sum. So this is what the code is about. Nonsensical program, but just to illustrate the gap instruction. So just keep this in mind when you move on to the next. Okay, so basically this statement here, when we are trying to access the value of R, it has this long, chain of get element ptr instructions where we start from one, and it's basically a chain of get element ptr before you finally get this conv, which is actually the what is returned from. This is the value of R actually finally. Now, to understand the gap instruction, what we can do is this is the instruction that we are considering now. The statement in C, matrix pixels at R1 for that column number 40, RGB and R. It might be useful if we consider working backwards from there. So this is the shaded location is what we want, right? Because it's a combination of structures and arrays. It will be somewhere in memory hanging around, and we want to get an access to this value. And this is where we start. So if you work backwards from there, there's a get element get instruction that takes this RGB would be the base address, right? And 0 and 0 are the indices of the get instruction. So 0 here is basically starting. You can consider that as starting of RGB here. And 0 is again, because in the RGB values, R is the first one. It's indexed at 0. So this is actually going to give us this address. The address starting at this point, at this thick red line, right? Now, how does this RGB come about? It comes about by looking at array index 3, which is the base address, right? And that would, this actually this one, this address. Now 0 is where it starts from, but here you see that the index is 2 because this is RGB is the third field in the pixel structure, and so on, right? So you keep going up the chain, and finally if you look at this particular place where we have a pointer to pixel, we need to dereference it. That's why you get this 1, and that will be used again to get this particular pixel. Okay, so basically the point that I want to make is any kind of dereferencing happens through a chain of complex get element PTR with different kinds of instructions interleaved between them. So we have a zero extension instruction here. You got a signed extension here because it requires an extension from I32 to I64, for example, right? So the point I'm trying to make is by the time you get R, you have to go through the sequence of get element PTR instructions. Now LLVM already has an inbuilt kind of a memory, abstract memory location named as decomposed gep. If you look at this example, the base address would be RGB and the constant indices would be 0 and 0. And for this one, for the second gep instruction, our index 3 is the base address, and the constant indexes would be 0 or 2. So it's also possible that you could have a variable index as well, which is in the third example, in which the base address is variable 1, and the variable index is this value, index promoted 2. Okay. All right. So if basically the thing is, if you see a get element PTR instruction, the way we model that is we just say that whatever is loaded, the result of that get element PTR instruction would be actually an address, and that would be nothing but decomposed get. This is how we model. This is the transfer function for the get element PTR instruction. Similarly, the 5 node, right? So when you have 5 nodes, we have different values coming in from the basic blocks that are the predecessors of that particular basic block under consideration. So for example, in this one, if you see, we have basically two pointers, PS1 and PS2. Yeah, so this is PS1, which takes the array address of array at 10, and PS2 takes whatever this A, whatever it stands for, which is coming in from outside, and PS3, which is pointed to from global memory, right? So we check if this condition is true, then PS2 will get assigned either the first array address of the first one in the array or the second one. So when it reaches this line, we don't know, it could be pointing to either this or this, right? So depending on that, we take certain actions. And this is the place where you will land up with a 5 instruction. A 5 instruction can produce pointers like this. So this array index 3, comma, if then this is the label from which it's coming from the predecessor basic block. If then is one of them and if else is the other one, and the result of that is also a pointer. Now the transfer function for the 5 node is fairly obvious. We know that it could be pointing either to index 3, array index 3 or array index 4, and therefore whatever this thing points to could only be a union of all the possible pointers it can point to. Possible memory locations that each of these variables, if you take a union of that's what this value of z would be pointing to. This is the way you get the possibility of having multiple memory locations being pointed to by the pointer. Right, at that point you wouldn't know whether it is pointing to array index 3 or array index 4. Now we can go on talking about transfer functions like this, but let's stop here because more or less the modeling is based on just common sense and how memory locations are handled and how pointers point to different memory locations. So we have discussed the transfer function for the store instruction, load, alloca, and gap instruction in the 5 node. These are the other bunch of instructions that can produce some effect on memory locations and pointers. So one of them is a select instruction. The select instruction is nothing but bunch of values coming in together, just like similar to a 5 node, and you need to pick one of those. A bit cast is another one. Into PTR is another. Call instructions are pretty complex to model because when you call a function, there could be several different ways in which memory locations can get clobbered and called into. So if you can pass addresses, or global memory can get mangled, and then by the time you come back, the caller calls the callee and the callee returns. There could be a bunch of changes. So any call instruction, any instruction that is dominated by that, we'll have to be very careful about modeling that because arbitrarily anything can change there. Any instruction that actually is dominated by the call instruction. So we do not cover that here. This comes under the domain of context-sensitive alias analysis, and that itself is a big area on its own, and that's also a complex problem to solve. Here I'm focusing only on the flow sensitivity, and of course intrinsic functions. So in this way, we define different transfer functions for different instructions. Now, what do we do with that? With this, we have a knowledge of which pointer is pointing to which memory location or memory locations. Now, with this, armed with this knowledge, we can implement a simple data flow analysis and do a fixed point iteration where we say, okay, these are the bunch of PP is the set of all program points in the program. This is only a global analysis. It's not interprocedural. It's not IPO. We have a bunch of abstract memory locations, ML, and then a set of all pointers that are visible in the function, which is P. Then what we want to actually determine is this structure, which is all the aliases that P can point to modeled by these memory locations. So at each and every point in the program, this is what we actually want to do. Right? So using those transfer functions and given these initial conditions, so some of them can be undef if it's at entry and so on. And we know that if there is no effect of that particular statement, it just simply gets propagated to the next statement from the previous statement instruction. So this is how we take this aliases and then we model them using a simple fixed point iteration. And at the end of this, you should be able to basically compute this value. In terms of the code, this would be a map of maps of a set of memory locations, which is pretty costly if you think about it. What we are saying is at every program point, we need to store at each point, which pointer points to which set of memory locations, and that can be pretty huge, right? So once we have that, we can query. We can give it 2 pointers and say, okay, I got this pointer value 1 and pointer value 2, and at this program point, I want to know what the result is. And this is what it will do. So it will look at, so this is stateful in the sense that we need to compute this particular mapping, and use that to return the result from for the query. And that could either be one of these, right? May alias, must alias, and no alias. Of course, I left out partial alias also, but that's also a possibility. Any questions so far? Okay. Okay, so coming to the heuristics, right? So we know that because at every program point, you need to store a map of set of memory locations. It is too expensive in time also, and more so in space, because we are talking about it could be a very huge amount of information at every point. Not only that, if you look at the GEP instruction that I discussed in point number 2, basically determining which memory location is being pointed to itself can be very hard to find out. It's actually somebody proved it to be NP hard and also an undecidable problem, because there's this possibility that it can never terminate. Therefore, some of the resolutions, of course, even the basic alias analysis that LVM has already implemented already includes things like cutting short the analysis as it keeps traversing up the use def chains, especially with get element PTR instructions. Right? It can go to any level, but then that's not the goal. So it'll terminate it at some point, maybe some 8 or 9 iterations, and we can follow the same mechanism here as well which I have implemented in the flow sensitive analysis. I am also limiting it to the same level at which LLVM's basic alias analysis stops at. One more improvement that I've implemented is, basically we don't need to keep a record of that mapping for every program point. We can just have that mapping at only those statements that can affect the value of the pointer. Right? For example, anything that changes the value of that mapping, only there we store that. What that means is we instead of storing it at every program point, we store it at the beginning of the basic block, right? And subsequently in any instruction that has that extra information about changing the memory location or the value at which the pointer is pointing to. So if you keep, limit the information to a small subset, I noticed that, the space limitations does get resolved to some extent. I don't know to what extent, but I tried with some, bit-sized piece of code, and it ran in reasonable time. But it didn't take too much memory. But the problem is there is a small, the penalty that needs to be paid in terms of time, because if you want, for example, at a particular program point, you want to find out whether 2 pointer variables alias each other. There's no way to do that if that statement does not affect pointers. You'll have to go backwards either until the beginning of the basic block or to the nearest statement that changes that value. But that time I found that it's not very severe, and in the mid-sized programs that I worked with, it seemed to be converging in reasonably good time. Plus, including the mapping also, we don't need to keep information about all the pointers, because there's really no need. Only if we know that queries might be important, we can store only those. So this is how we model basically the flow sensitive alias analysis for every statement or statements that affect pointers and memory locations. We define a transfer function and then use data flow analysis to determine that mapping, and use that mapping for queries against any 2 arbitrary pointers at that particular location. We query that. But if you look at LLVM's basic analysis, you can only do it globally. So in this query that you see, there cannot be any program point, because whatever you are asking for from the basic alias analysis can only be limited to the entire program. It's not relevant what program point you give it, because it's this thing, whatever it turns will be true for the entire program. But if you want force sensitivity, you would definitely need to pass which statement you're interested in. So that completes my talk. But before I conclude, there are some other small heuristics that we can employ. Let me go back to this earlier code, and I'll illustrate with an example. So for example, if you look here, another thing that we can do, which I have not implemented, which actually I'm in the process of implementing. If you see these two values R1 and R2, if this is true, then we do this, right? We are calculating this two values, RGB dot. Everything is the same. You know that the get instructions that get generated from these two are exactly similar, and they would also be similar. R1, because R1 and R2 are similar, are the same, right? So the gap instruction that get generated would be similar, and one of them can be. You don't need to load the whole thing. You don't need to go up the whole gap related usedef chain. You can just get one of them and reuse it for the second. In fact, they're exactly the same thing. So you do all those stores and loads only once instead of doing it twice. So simple stuff like this. So what that actually tells us is we can actually use a combination of different kind of constant maybe propagation or dead code analysis to figure out alias analysis as well. So nowadays, I think a lot of people are trying to say, do one optimization at a time. A combination of different optimizations in things like SCCP and dead code elimination and even GVN together in one shot instead of doing it step by step. So we can employ such a method and also throw in alias analysis in it. Of course, there are many ways to skin a cat. You can generate heuristics for whatever you think might be good. So if you see LLVM, there are a lot of heuristics there. So we can include some of these clever heuristics and also get better results. So this is just one example of that. So that concludes my talk.
Can you go over the last slide?
I'm hearing my voice. I don't know why.
Last slide.
Yeah, no,
This one.
The first resolution, please.
No. You might have to. I'll give you. You might have to take over and expand it.
Yeah, so I didn't fully understand the first resolution you had.
Sorry, which one?
Limit traversal of usedef chains.
The last one?
Of limit traversal. So the first point in the sum resolution.
Oh, this one. Okay, this one. Okay. What I meant here was we started off saying that we define transfer functions for every statement that can affect memory, like the store and the loads, and specifically when you're dealing with pointers. And there are only a subset of those among all the whole bunch of instructions that LLVM has got, right? Now, using those transfer functions, we define mappings, and that mapping has to be defined at every statement, at every instruction, right? Now, the thing about that is, if you basically at every, you don't need to do that at every line, right? So if you look at, let me go back to the slide. I think that will be much simpler. The gap instruction. One more. This one. So you see this series of get element PTR instructions. We have, if you look at RGB, this comes from this instruction, and array index RGB in turn comes from array index 3, which is this one. So this is the chain that I'm talking about. You keep going, working backwards, and then you see that there's a usedef one. So this is being defined here, array index 3, and being used here, right? Now, in large complex pieces of code, this chain can get very arbitrarily long. It can, I mean, basically it can be anything. You can have a series of instead. They can even have, multiply and add operations and calling functions, bunch of things like that. This is what I meant by the usedef chain. So the usedef chain, you can keep going backwards and back and forth. Basically, it can lead to non-termination also sometimes. So what LLVM's basic alias analysis does is to limit this usedef chain to say that, okay, I have tried some 7-8 times and I'm not able to determine what this memory location is pointing to, and then give up from there. So once it gives up, it can, there's no way we can figure out which memory location that particular pointer is pointing to. And that's when we give up and then return back a may alias result, the conservative one.
How about
So
memory SSA? I mean, is it also not accurate?
Memory SSA, I have not delved into it. Earlier, I think they're using something called memory dependence, which internally uses, which is the interface for all the clients. But I see that most of the clients nowadays are still not moved to memory SSA. They're still using this philosophy.
I think this SLP is memory SSA is pretty accurate that way, right? It takes into consideration these different control flows and all.
Okay, I have not looked into memory SSA, but does it handle the same thing as what flow analysis can give? Or maybe it is doing the same thing or similar things?
Yeah, so basically by introducing this control flow intelligence, what you are making sure is that some pointers which are may aliases may be now aliases, right?
Yeah, correct.
Right. So you are fine tuning that.
May aliases, we'll try to make it better. Maybe we hopefully must alias or no alias.
Right. Memory SSA is more of a client of alias analysis, right?
I'm not sure about that, but I know that before memory SSA, memory dependence analysis was being used, and that was a client of basically alias analysis.
Yeah, but memory dependence analysis kind of also depends on alias information. I mean, alias information is the base for everything else.
True.
Right.
So I was delving more into the basically the foundation of alias analysis, not the clients of that.
Okay.
Yeah. But you're right. I think memory SSA is
in practice.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, are you using this anywhere in practice?
So I implemented this and I tried it out on a few pieces of code and it seems to be working fine, but I'm not upstreamed it yet. So I need to figure out, maybe speak to the LLVM folks and probably upstream it if I get some code reviews.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've been able to cover most of the cases. So it seems to be working fairly well. But then on a very large piece of code, I'm not very sure about that. I'm just wondering a lot. I'm just it's kind of a loud thinking. Why flow sensitivity was never implemented in the first place? Because it seemed to be a very straightforward thing to do.
Yeah, it was not implemented because it turns out to be a very expensive analysis. When you try to run it on real programs, it becomes really slow. And there's actually a lot of literature that talks about how, what heuristics you can use or how you can speed up the basic data flow model.
Right.
So are you using this new alias analysis framework somewhere, or what sort of performance gains or aliases you are able to uncover with this?
So this is just more like a toy project for me. I've been, I used it on some mid-size code with some, which basically when I say mid-size, I mean some kind of an application, like a VLSI kind of thing, which I would call it too small, but it seems to be working fairly well. So it took almost the same time as a normal, when a O3 optimization would do, maybe around 2% more time in terms of time. I don't have the metrics for that, unfortunately, because I was not tracking it too much. So it was more like a project that I had done on the side, and I was just keeping track just for my interest.
So one function is the boundary for this entire analysis, right?
Yes.
We are not using that. Okay.
IPO, there's no IPO. Yeah.
Okay.
This is only global optimization.
Okay.
So one thing that I've been doing is I'm using this in loop hoisting. So loop hoisting, I think in the master I think it was using basic only. GVN was using memory SSA. And when I ran this, it seemed to be doing slightly better than that, than the memory SSA one. So any other questions?
Yeah, I have one question. Initially, you said that you took the IR before MEM2 Reg pass, right?
Yeah.
And I do understand that when you transfer these things from memory to register, what happens? But I've seen people trying to do alias analysis after MEM2 Reg as well. So what is the implication of doing that? Are we doing something which is unsound?
Good question. So the thing about mem2reg is it does move everything, I mean, as much as it can from memory to registers. So beyond that point, I think some of this flow analysis might not be relevant anymore because mem2reg does a good job of moving it from, promoting it from memory to registers. But still, what can happen is that, so two things. One is with arrays and structures, you still have stuff in memory where this can still be useful, flow sensitivity. And the other case is basically after mem2reg, there might be a bunch of transformations and it could be followed by register allocation. So register allocation sometimes when a lot of live variables and we don't rematerialize those values, a lot of them get spilled back into memory. So when it gets spilled back into memory, this will be useful. Sorry.
Another point could be that mem2reg is basically removing those local allocations.
Local,
global
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So global memory is
not
still
the arrays. Yeah, not the arrays.
Right. So global memory is going to be useful.
Yes. True.
For
global and local also arrays or structures, even if it's local, it still be useful. Right. And in the cases where register allocation spills it over back into memory, if it's not able to handle, I think all this things like common substitution element, CSC and all that, they do a lot of they generate a lot of temporary registers, and they might be live for a very long time. And when you run register allocation on that, they will again get back spilled into memory from registers. And at that time, this kind of alias analysis will be useful again.
Okay, so it's something like in the past pipeline, when are you like invoking this the flow sensitive version of alias analysis? So after all the optimization, or you are invoking it multiple times or something?
I tried it inserting it multiple times. Once after a bunch of optimizations, then again after register allocation, and then transformations, and again after some time. I think I inserted some 3-4 places.
No. Okay.
It was difficult to track after that, so I sort of left.
Yeah. So one more question I have is that I'm not very familiar with the alias analysis framework in LLVM, but how hard was it to plug in value? Like, say you have analysis and you want to plug in value back to LLVM, right? So how user friendly that interface is?
When you say plug it back into LLVM, so it's just another pass, just like any other pass. So you include that. So now I didn't use the latest, the optimization pass. I used the old one.
Okay.
But I think that's such a simple matter of rewriting a little bit of the C++ code to. So it's a fairly simple. It's just like another pass. Yeah. Just like any other analysis.
Okay. So what I'm trying to ask is, like, let's say we have an external tool. Let's say we have external tool and that can emit out something that we can fed into LLVM. I'm not saying like something that front end emits, like we did something on LL on the LLVM IR, and then we got all the information. And so I'm saying, is some like how hard do you think that would be, like, if you want to do that?
So you're saying we have some kind, this LLVM IR in some form, then you plug in that external tool, it does this flow sensitivity and then plugs it back, right?
It plugs the information back.
I never tried that because all this infrastructure is already there to the optimization pass, to the pass manager. So what you seem to be suggesting is to do it externally out of tree as an application and then somehow plug it back. But why would you want to do that if you've got a pass manager that? So the pass manager is supposed to circumvent exactly that problem.
I'm trying to say, like, we have a let's say we have an external thing that also uses LLVM pass manager, and it works on LL file something. So I'm asking this because I have a external implementation, and after your talk, I'm thinking to plug it back with this implementation doesn't know what the alias analysis framework of LLVM looks like. Yeah.
So I think there are mechanisms to build this whatever you have built outside the tree. And then through the CMake, some configurations, you can plug it back. So I didn't build it outside the tree. I built it inside source tree itself. But I think that's a possibility. It's not a big deal. Did you try building outside the tree? Outside the main source tree?
Yes. It's totally external. So I was thinking of something like you gave that binary LL file, and that binary will dump the alias analysis result, and I can have a pass inside LLVM that can read it, that can read the dump, which is the alias analysis result, and that can use it.
Yeah,
I guess I need to look into it. Yeah.
So there's a print all debug info or some pass that already does that. So yeah, there's so many passes, and I'm sure whatever you're looking for will already be likely to be there already.
I think from going from out of tree to the in project pass implementation is just a matter of changing the CMake from dynamic library to static library.
Yeah, exactly.
But my question was that I want to keep it outside. I just want to provide.
He wants to keep it outside full. Yeah. You want to keep it completely independent of the LLVM thing, right?
Yeah. So I was looking, was there some standard way that LLVM, produces alias analysis information, and then I can just emit the same information and it can read it from there.
So even if you want to do it externally, completely external to LLVM, then you will have to create a project, and in the CMake file, I think you'll need to include all those dependencies from LLVM.
That is working. That the external thing is working, but I'm not sure whether it emits it in a way that LLVM may be able to use it. So what I'm trying to, after your talk, I got motivated. I'm like, okay, let me put that information inside LLVM and let's see how much improvement I am getting. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. No, I said that. Yeah, I guess I guess I need to look into the alias analysis framework in LLVM and figure it out. Yeah. It should not be hard.
It's just like any other optimization pass. It could either be a transformation or an analysis, and this one is an analysis. So it doesn't clobber the LLVM IR. It's a simpler one. So it doesn't need to be rebuilt every time.
Okay.
What do you mean by the alias analysis framework?
So that I think it includes things like the basic alias, and I think it has got a bunch of other things. LLVM. There's something called Steensgaard's analysis. I didn't delve into that. I think that's basically context sensitive analysis. Steensgaard. Probably it is. I think it is patented or something. So they have it. They don't have it in the main branch. It needs to be used separately. But basic alias analysis and there are a bunch of other clients to that for all the optimization passes to use, so that it'll be simpler to call those clients instead of directly calling alias analysis. So things like, there's something called alias set tracker. You don't, basically the most granular level is to pass 2 pointers and ask whether they refer to the same memory, whether they alias each other. Instead of that, I think the interface, for example, to LICM, loop invariant code motion, I think is a much simpler version. You don't pass 2 pointers and ask I think you ask it through that other client, Alias set tracker, stuff like that basically. So that entire set of tools is what we refer to as the alias analysis infrastructure.
Okay, interesting.
You have any other questions?
Can I ask a question?
Sure, please.
So, Sisha, you said that, so it might be a very naive question, okay? So you said that you haven't tested this on large set of programs, right? But you are able to almost get things quite correct, right? So
Yes.
any thoughts on how would you, or maybe formally, how do we prove these kind of things or these kind of analysis to be correct? Any thoughts on that? And it could be out of the context of this whole thing, but just a thought.
So I didn't use the LLVM's testing infrastructure. So what I did was I had a bunch of standard C programs for which I knew the outcome, and I would write the test cases against that and confirm that the LLVM, the intermediate representation that was getting generated from this flow sensitive alias analysis was correct according to that. Yeah, that's a bit of an effort, but I think there will be simpler ways to do this for sure.
No, my question was more on having or is it a good idea to have any kind of theoretical proofs for the transfer functions which you had shown?
Again, I think a transfer function is more based on a heuristic, which is, I mean, it could be a simple rule, but there is no theoretical. I'm not sure. I mean, the data flow analysis has got a sound foundation in fixed point iteration and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But as far as the transfer functions themselves are concerned, it's based on just simple rules, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. So I saw it somewhere for C, and I applied the same thing for LLVM.
And this whole analysis would work for multi-level of indirections?
What do you mean by multi-level interaction?
Pointer to pointer or this kind of thing? Would that require any?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I could not hear that.
So it would be like a pointer to a pointer to a pointer, right?
Yeah. That it'll work. So it's insensitive to that.
Yeah, GEP chain which we had, right? That is going to take care of it.
Yeah. So the GEP chain is even more complicated because in between you can have interleaved with several different instructions. Could be anything arbitrary. It couldn't be even be a function for call or something like that. But you're right. It'll take care of that also. It handles that well.
Okay.
So I'm looking forward to make this upstream. My only concern is about the size of the program. I'm not sure about it. So we need to see. Get some more inputs from people and take an informed decision.
You can use CSmith to generate random programs and test this pass on it.
Sorry, which one? Which tool did you mention?
CSmith. It's a fuzzing tool.
Oh, fuzzing tool. Okay. Can you spell that out? Can you type that in?
Yep.
But even with CSmith, you need to manually annotate the test cases, right? Or you need to have an oracle somewhere. Like you need to have something that can act as an oracle.
All right.
Yeah. You may want to look at. So I don't know what happened to my chat. It's not getting updated. Yeah. So you may want to take a look at. There's something called PTA Ben, capital P, capital T, capital A, and then BEN. So it's stand for Point to Analysis Benchmark, and they have lot of simple examples that can definitely check the. They are for, I guess, checking the correctness of the code. Yeah. correctness of your implementation. So they already have this annotated example. So you'll find many small test cases there, and each test case there will be a line which will be saying, okay, these two things may alias or must alias. So they have the results all.
Okay.
Hello. Am I
Yeah, hi.
audible?
Yes.
Hi. So actually, PTAB and I had also worked with that. But since your program is intra-procedural, that might not be of much help. I mean, you'll have to manually edit it to make it like most of the test cases there are inter-procedural. You might have to make it intra-procedural. So that's what even I had done for testing when I was trying to implement alias analysis.
Okay.
I thought to share this.
Sure. Thanks. So is this, you're saying it's mostly all inter-procedural, but there's no way we can do intra-procedural?
I mean, I had manually, basically I had inlined those function calls.
Okay.
And then inserted my may alias, must alias function call. You may want to check out the link. I mean, what I did. Probably you might have some comments in that.
Sure. Please type that in.
One query oblique suggestion is that so this alias analysis is actually an analysis pass, right? So unless we
Yes.
plug this into some real optimization pass and then we show again, I think won't it be difficult to push it? I mean, just because this has to have some optimization pass as a client, which is really getting benefit out of this CFG based alias analysis.
Yeah, I mean, eventually, I mean, we need to get benefit from all the, loop optimizations or any other kind of scalar optimization that might benefit from this. That's for sure. Or else,
right. So some optimization pass should use this,
yes.
consume this information,
Yes.
and then show the real performance benefit, either in terms of
Yes.
number of instructions or the load store count should go down or something else.
Yeah. So already tried that with LICM and GVN as well. So I replaced the basic one with this one, and it definitely gave. I mean, obviously it will give better results, but the only worry is about the program size.
Why will the program size increase?
I meant, sorry, not the program size. I meant the storing all that state information for at every point, program point. Even though I mitigated it to some extent, I really, like I said, I not really tried it on very large programs, mostly mid-sized ones. So on all the small programs that I tried, so for example, I would run this, I take this LICM, replace this basic analysis with this flow sensitive thing, and it gave definitely it gave better results, but the space constraint at runtime is what I was not very sure about.